Do you think she'll cry when she reads them? Nate's voice was casual, as if asking about the weather. Brandon laughed from the other room. Women are so predictable. They didn't know I was standing in the hallway, holding the drinks. Frozen. My pulse roaring in my ears. That was 5 days before Christmas. This story didn't begin with betrayal. It began with jokes. Always, always jokes. You know I could leave you tomorrow, right? Brandon would grin at parties, arm around me, whiskey in hand. Everyone would laugh. So would I. Because I had learned to laugh. Like I had learned to fold laundry just the way he liked. Like I had learned not to wear red after he once muttered, "Trying too hard, aren't we?" Like I had learned to disappear, inch by inch. You don't notice the way a rope tightens until you're already choking. To the outside world, we looked perfect. He was handsome, charming, stable. I was polite, supportive, smiling. People said we were goals. Behind closed doors, Brandon never shouted. Never hit. No. He weaponized silence. And sarcasm. He used compliments like handcuffs and criticism like knives hidden in silk. Don't embarrass me in front of my coworkers. You're lucky I put up with this. Honestly, Steph, what would you even do without me? I told myself this was marriage. That it would pass. That one day, the jokes would stop stinging. That if I just loved harder, things would get better. But loving harder never fixes manipulation. It just feeds it. My best friend Danny saw it long before I did. You're quieter lately, she said one afternoon as we sat in a coffee shop. He's just been stressed, I replied automatically. You flinched when I touched your arm, Steph. I looked away. The truth was, I had stopped recognizing myself. Stopped posting on social media. Stopped going to book club. Stopped answering my sister's calls. I had become a shadow in my own life. And Brandon liked it that way. The first real crack in the facade came at his company's winter gala. He had won too many glasses of bourbon when he leaned in and whispered in my ear, venom hidden beneath the champagne. You're just like your mother, clinging, needy, never enough. I froze. My blood turned cold. I didn't say anything. I just smiled. That night, while he passed out on the couch in his tuxedo, I sat on the kitchen floor and cried. And then I did something I'd never done before. I Googled divorce lawyers. We were 2 weeks away from Christmas. Brandon had started acting confident. Cocky, even. He came home late. Started dressing better. Was on his phone more. Started calling me honey again, like he used to, but only in public. Something was off. One night, he left his laptop open. I wasn't snooping. But the screen lit up with a message from Nate. Can't wait to see her face when you do it. On Christmas? Brutal, man. You better film it. I stared at that message for a full minute. That's when I knew. They had made a bet. That night, I didn't cry. I did the dishes. I kissed him goodnight. I told him I loved him. And then I went to the garage and pulled out the fireproof box my father gave me years ago. Inside was a folder I hadn't touched in ages. Medical records. Old pay stubs. Receipts. I tucked in a new file. Labeled it, just in case. It was time to stop shrinking. It was time to start preparing. I wasn't planning revenge. Not yet. But I wasn't going to let him win, either. Brandon thought I would cry on Christmas Day. He didn't know I had already picked out the gift I'd give him. And it was going to change everything. They say there are moments when your soul whispers, when your body goes cold not from fear, but from clarity. That moment came for me the night Brandon stumbled in drunk from another late-night meeting. He reeked of cheap whiskey and cologne that wasn't mine. His tie was askew, lips loose with arrogance. He dropped his coat on the back of a dining chair and poured himself another drink like he was entitled to the air in the room, let alone my tolerance. I sat at the kitchen island, flipping through an old cookbook, pretending to search for a holiday dessert, pretending not to notice the lipstick on his collar, pretending the house wasn't starting to smell like betrayal. And then, without looking up, I said quietly, "You always joke about leaving me. Maybe we should make it official, sign something, just in case." He chuckled in that condescending way, the one where his lips twist just slightly, where his eyes don't even bother meeting yours. "What, like a prenup? You really think I'm worth that much?" He raised an eyebrow, sloshing his whiskey with a smug little grin. Then, in a flourish that only a man too arrogant to imagine consequences could pull off, he grabbed a cocktail napkin, scrawled his name with a flourish, and wrote, "If we split, Steph keeps the house and everything in it. Signed, B." He slid it across the granite with a smirk. "There. You can stop worrying. That'll hold up, right?" He laughed like it was a punchline. I smiled back, lips barely parting, the corners of my mouth trembling not with fear, but with control. He passed out on the couch 20 minutes later, remote slipping from his fingers. I watched him from the hallway, arms crossed, heart steady for the first time in weeks. He didn't remember that napkin in the morning. But I did. The next day, I called Danny. She didn't ask questions, she didn't need to. I could hear the tension in her breath as I told her I needed a favor. A notary. Somewhere private. Somewhere quiet. She offered her office. I scanned the napkin into a PDF before I left the house. Made 3 copies. Put one in a red folder. One in an envelope labeled insurance. One on a USB drive. The notary barely blinked. He'd seen stranger things, probably. But I could feel it, the weight of what I was doing. For the first time in my life, I was choosing myself, quietly, gently, but without apology. Later that night, Brandon kissed me on the forehead like everything was normal, like he hadn't just unknowingly handed me the rope to pull myself out of the well he dug for me. I kissed him back. Played my role. Stirred the stew, made his plate, and laughed when he called me his queen in front of his parents during dinner that weekend. He thought I was softening. I was just sharpening. The days moved on like clock hands, slow, predictable, ticking steadily toward December 25th. I kept my head down. I stopped fighting. I started logging. Everything. When he muttered, "useless," under his breath after I forgot to restock the ice trays, I noted the time, the tone, the setting. When he told me, "Don't talk when we're out. You always say weird stuff," I wrote it down. When he bought a second gym bag and stashed it in the trunk, I recorded the mileage on the car before and after his workouts. You see, I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was documenting. On the outside, I became the woman he wanted. I praised his cooking, complimented his hair, asked about his day with genuine warmth. I massaged his shoulders after he complained about work, nodded along as he ranted about office politics. But inside? I was archiving every moment like a historian preparing for a trial. Then one night, the true betrayal arrived. I was folding laundry, as usual. And from the back pocket of his jeans slipped a folded receipt. It was from a boutique hotel 20 minutes from our home. 2 glasses of champagne. Chocolate-covered strawberries. A room booked under the name M. Davis. We hadn't been to a hotel together in months. I hadn't had champagne since our anniversary. And strawberries? That was her thing. The woman from his office. I had seen them once, whispering too closely near the water cooler. I hadn't thought anything of it then. But now, her initials, the receipt, the room number, it all painted a picture. A clear, undeniable picture. But I didn't confront him. I scanned the receipt. Labeled it Valentine's Hotel. Filed it away. That night, he came home with roses. Red ones. Said he felt guilty for being distant. Said he missed us. I kissed him. Told him I appreciated the gesture. Let him think the flowers erased the evidence in my drawer. It didn't. 1 week later, Danny and I sat in her office again, surrounded by printouts, files, and screenshots. She looked over the napkin again, this time, paired with credit card statements, work emails, and bank withdrawals he thought I didn't notice. "We need more," she said, calm but certain. "Enough to back this up if he tries to contest it." So, we added layers. An amendment, drafted and notarized. It clarified that the original agreement was voluntarily signed. It outlined asset division, tied it to dates and purchase receipts, and included a clause for emotional abuse based on documentation and third-party testimony. Brendan may have written a joke on a napkin. But we turned it into a legal noose he couldn't wiggle out of. Danny handed me a flash drive with everything encrypted. "He thinks this is a game," she said, sliding the flash into a padded envelope. "But he doesn't know you've already won." That night, I slept better than I had in months. Over the following days, I began recording phone calls. Only the ones where his mask slipped, the moments when he ridiculed me, mocked my voice, my cooking, my family. I didn't flinch. I just tapped record, labeled the file, and smiled as I made his morning coffee. I became invisible by design. The woman he thought would cry in the ashes of his betrayal? She was gone. What stood in her place was someone he had underestimated for far too long. He called me dependable to his friends. Said I was too soft to leave. That she won't survive without me. I let him believe that. Every lie he told about me, every joke he cracked at my expense, every bet he made with his friends, I let them pile up like bricks in the foundation of my exit. Brendan thought Christmas would be the day he destroyed me. What he didn't know was that it would be the day I set myself free. And he wouldn't even see it coming. He thought I didn't know. About the messages. About the bets. About the plan to hand me divorce papers over peppermint pie. But what he forgot is that the woman he thought was breaking? She was building. One calculated moment at a time. From the outside, nothing changed. That was the plan. Brendan came and went like always, his car keys clinking on the counter, his shoes kicked off by the door, his voice loud when he was bragging, sharp when he was home. He still demanded dinner on time. Still critiqued my outfits. Still gave backhanded compliments like, "You look nice when you put in effort." And I smiled. I smiled like a woman in love. Like a woman who was too grateful, too tired, too soft to notice the cracks in her own foundation. I smiled at breakfast, when he made a show of checking his phone, then putting it face down. I smiled at dinner, when he said his coworker just needed a ride home. I smiled when he called me babe in front of his friends, then whispered, "Don't talk too much tonight," through clenched teeth before a work dinner. He thought I was shrinking again. He thought the fight had gone out of me. But I wasn't shrinking. I was watching. Learning. Preparing. I knew his tells. The way his voice changed when he was lying, just a little too smooth. The way he avoided eye contact when I asked casual questions like, "Did you make that gym appointment?" The way he suddenly got defensive about his space and started locking his phone. That one made me chuckle. Because I had already cloned it months ago. Synced the data. Forwarded everything important to my private email. Every call. Every text. Every location ping. He had no idea I was already 10 steps ahead. One evening, I sat across from him at our favorite Italian restaurant, his choice. He ordered a second glass of red and launched into a monologue about how hard his job was, how no one appreciated him, how his boss was clearly intimidated by his success. I nodded at all the right times, tracing the rim of my wine glass with my finger. And then he leaned in, gave me that smirk, and said, "You know, if we ever split up, you'd be the sad one. You're not built for being alone." I let out a soft laugh. "You're probably right." He grinned, proud of his little dig, not noticing the flicker in my eyes as I filed the quote away in my mental archive. That one would be titled Alone. Dated. Logged. Stored. You see, he had no idea the strength it takes to stay in the fire while pretending to enjoy the warmth. At home, I kept playing the role. His good little wife. I cleaned, cooked, and kissed him goodbye each morning. I wore the perfume he liked. The slippers he gifted me. I even started posting on social media again, sunlit shots of dinners I made, quotes about love and resilience. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to keep up the image he believed was real. And Brandon? He got lazy. He thought he'd broken me enough to stop being careful. That was his biggest mistake. Because while he was planning his little Christmas spectacle, while he and Nate laughed about how I'd crumble, I was becoming an actress so skilled, even I forgot where the mask ended and I began. One Saturday, I walked into the bedroom while he was in the shower. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Just once. Just long enough for me to see the preview. M. Davis, hotels booked. Room 512. Wear that blue shirt I like. I stared at the screen. Not out of shock. That was long gone. But out of calm, strategic confirmation. I took a screenshot. Then another. I forwarded them. Deleted the message from his phone like I had done dozens of times before. He never knew. He never knew I was the ghost haunting his every move. That evening, I asked if he wanted to invite Nate and his girlfriend over for drinks next weekend. He grinned and said, "You're finally acting normal again." I nodded. I guess I'm just in the Christmas spirit. The irony wasn't lost on me. Every time he thought he was winning, he was handing me more rope. More leverage. More truth. Like the day I found the second bank account. He'd left his tablet open while watching a football game, thinking I was in the kitchen. But I wasn't. I was behind him, quietly reading through the confirmation email from a private investment firm, his name, his ID, a signature. He was funneling money. Planning his exit. He didn't know I already had a copy of that signature. On the napkin. On the amendment Danny drafted. On the holiday card he wrote just days earlier. That's when I knew exactly how to beat him. Not by shouting. Not by crying. But by letting him bury himself in his own carelessness. The next day, I started organizing. Every folder had a label. Every screenshot had a timestamp. Every recording, every receipt, every cruel voicemail was in its place. And I still smiled. At the Christmas tree we decorated together. At the hot cocoa I made him. At the gifts I wrapped for his parents, with bows and tags in gentle handwriting that read with love, Steph. He didn't know the box under the tree with his name on it wasn't from the department store. It was from my filing cabinet. Wrapped in gold. Tied with velvet ribbon. Labeled, "To Brandon, for all you've given me." And still, he underestimated me. He thought I'd cry. He thought I'd shatter when he pulled out those papers in front of his family. That I'd collapse in embarrassment, scream, sob, run upstairs in disgrace. He thought his big moment would be the end of me. But Brandon forgot something. You don't break women who've already been through fire. You just show them they're finally free. 2 nights before Christmas, we hosted a small gathering. Just friends, just wine. Nate was there, of course, drunk off bourbon, throwing glances at me like I was already a ghost. "You're too quiet tonight, Steph," he slurred. I smiled. "Just soaking it all in." He laughed. "Bet you won't be smiling on Christmas, huh?" Brandon shot him a look. Nate shrugged. They shared a laugh. I poured more wine. "Well, Christmas is full of surprises." They had no idea what I meant. And that was the best part. The morning of Christmas Eve, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection. The woman who looked back at me wasn't broken. She wasn't scared. She wasn't small. She was calm. Certain. Ready. I slipped the documents into the box. The napkin agreement. The notarized amendment. A thumb drive containing all the evidence, messages, photos, audio recordings. I topped it with a note that said, "You never thought I'd be ready. But I always was. Merry Christmas." Then I wrapped it, placed it under the tree, and smiled. The house was quiet. Too quiet. But not for long. Because tomorrow, Brandon was going to get exactly what he wanted. A Christmas he'd never forget. But it wouldn't end with my tears. It would end with a present. And his downfall. Wrapped with a bow. Christmas morning arrived like it always did, quiet, deceptively peaceful, wrapped in the smell of cinnamon and pine and that peculiar stillness that clings to the air before something breaks. Snow dusted the windowsills. Soft music played from the Bluetooth speaker. Brandon set up the night before. Our tree sparkled, perfectly symmetrical, just how he liked it. I'd even lit the holiday candles, the ones his mother gifted me years ago, the ones I never really liked but always displayed for tradition's sake. Everything looked perfect. That's how he needed it. That's how I wanted it. He came downstairs in the maroon reindeer sweater I bought him last year, with matching socks and that self-satisfied grin he always wore when he believed he was in control. "Smells good," he said, grabbing a mug of coffee and planting a kiss on my cheek like a doting husband from a commercial. I smiled, pulling the cinnamon rolls out of the oven. "Breakfast will be ready in 10, I said. He didn't notice my hands weren't trembling. By noon, the house was full, his parents, his sister, her boyfriend, and of course Nate, whose cologne entered the room 10 seconds before he did. Everyone laughed and chatted as they placed gifts under the tree. Brandon played host, carving the turkey, telling stories, pouring drinks. I moved like I always did, silent, attentive, gracious. I passed plates, refilled glasses, took photos of the cousins by the fireplace. If anyone noticed how still my smile was, how my eyes didn't quite shine, they said nothing. Then came dessert. That's when Brandon tapped his glass with the side of his butter knife and stood, steadying himself like a man preparing to give a toast. He had rehearsed this moment. I could tell. He cleared his throat, giving me that same smug glance he gave before telling a punchline. "I want to thank everyone for coming," he began, flashing his fake humility smile. "And I especially want to thank my beautiful wife, Steph, for making today so special." He looked at me then, directly, like a man about to pull the rug out from under someone who didn't know they were standing on it. "But," he continued, chuckling to himself, "Steph and I have actually been talking about changes. Some big changes." I watched his mother's face drop slightly, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. "And," Brandon said, pausing for effect, "I think now's the perfect time to make it official." He pulled a thin envelope from the pocket of his sweater. My heart didn't skip a beat. My hands didn't shake. I reached for my wineglass, sipped slowly, and looked him square in the eyes. "You're really doing this now?" I asked softly, so gently it almost sounded like disbelief. Nate snorted. "Better now than never, right?" Brandon handed me the envelope. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." I took it. Opened it. Pretended to scan the pages like they were a surprise. Divorce papers. Clean, cold, calculated. He expected me to cry. Expected a scene. Expected gasps, maybe a run up the stairs. Instead, I folded the papers carefully and set them on the table next to my plate. "Thank you," I said calmly, lifting a forkful of pie to my mouth. That was thoughtful. The room fell into stunned silence. Brandon blinked. "That's all you have to say?" I dabbed the corner of my mouth with a napkin, then smiled. "No, actually. I have something for you too." I reached under the tree and retrieved the small gold-wrapped box I'd placed there myself just hours earlier. "You might want to open it now." He laughed nervously. Okay." He unwrapped it casually at first. Then slower. More cautious. He lifted the lid and stared. Inside, stacked neatly, were copies of everything. The napkin agreement. The notarized amendment. The hotel receipts. The screenshots of texts. A printed transcript of one of his phone calls, his voice, his words, his betrayal. And on top, the note. "You never thought I'd be ready. But I always was. Merry Christmas." For a moment, no one spoke. Brandon's face paled, eyes darting across the pages. He flipped through them like a man trying to find a trapdoor in a locked room. Nate leaned in, confused. "What is this?" Brandon's sister covered her mouth. His mom shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "And me?" I took another sip of wine. Crossed my legs. Let the silence stretch. Because silence, in that moment, said everything. Brandon looked up at me, throat dry. "Where did you get all this?" My voice was still soft. Still even. "I've had it for a while. I just wanted you to have your moment. You know, the one you planned with your friend here." I nodded toward Nate. Nate stood abruptly. "I didn't." I tilted my head. "Please don't insult me by pretending it was all Brandon." The walls started closing in on him then. He stood, rattled, grabbing the documents, flipping them as if hoping for some kind of loophole. "This doesn't mean anything," he stammered. "It was a joke." "It was notarized," I said quietly. "And the addendum?" "Signed, dated, and filed. Danny's had a copy for weeks." His jaw clenched. "You've been spying on me?" "No," I said. "I've been documenting." "There's a difference." His mother stood slowly, clearing her throat. "Maybe we should all just take a breath." "No," I said, standing now too. "Let's all stay. You've been in this marriage with me, remember?" You all laughed at his jokes. You smiled when he said I was too sensitive, too emotional, too much. You never asked if I was okay. Well, I am. I'm okay now. The power in the room shifted. I felt it ripple through my bones. Brandon was unraveling, right there in front of his family, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Because I didn't just catch him cheating. I had built a legal wall around myself with his own words, his own signature, his own ego. "I want the house," he said, voice lower now, trying to regain control. "You can't keep it." "You gave it to me," I said. "In writing." "And the mortgage?" "My name's been on every payment for 3 years. I've paid the utilities. Repaired the roof. The judge will see the napkin. The amended clause. The bank records. You'll lose. You're bluffing." "I'm not." I watched him shrink. Not physically. But in the way that bullies do when their power no longer lands. I turned to his parents then. "I wish you a lovely holiday. I truly do." But I won't be joining for dinner tomorrow. I'll be meeting with my attorney. Then I looked at Brandon one last time. And you? You won't see me cry. Because I'm not sad this is ending. I'm grateful. Grateful that you showed me exactly who you were. In time for me to leave with everything I deserve. I picked up my coat, walked past the stunned faces, and stepped out into the crisp December air. Snow crunched beneath my boots. The sky was quiet, the kind of stillness that only comes after a storm you saw coming from miles away. I didn't cry. Not on the porch. Not in the car. Not that night, when I curled up on Danny's guest bed and finally, slept without waiting for footsteps or raised voices or passive-aggressive muttering. I didn't cry. Because I didn't lose. I'd already mourned that marriage long ago. Now, I was reclaiming my peace. And Brandon? He got what he wanted. He got to serve divorce papers on Christmas. He just didn't expect a gift in return. He bet I'd cry. But I smiled instead. And he opened a box that held the end of his power. But it wasn't over yet. Because while Brandon tried to save face, I had one more surprise waiting. Something he never saw coming. I spent Christmas night alone in Danny's guest room, blanketed in silence, but not loneliness. There's a specific kind of stillness that arrives after you step through fire and realize your skin hasn't burned. Just soot. Just ash. Easily washed away. For the first time in years, I slept without clenching my jaw or listening for footsteps in the hall. There were no midnight mutterings, no slammed cabinet doors, no sharp words whispered through clenched teeth to haunt me in the dark. Just sleep. Deep and clean. In the morning, I woke up before the sun, brewed a cup of coffee in Danny's cheerful yellow kitchen, and opened my laptop. It was time. Brandon thought I'd disappear into the night, too embarrassed to speak. He was wrong. Because there was one final act I'd saved, something more permanent than courtrooms and custody agreements. A legacy, of sorts. It began with a simple post. Instagram. @StephLivesFree. Camera with flash photo, a quiet living room, Christmas lights glowing, a single wrapped gift under the tree. Caption. He gave me divorce papers on Christmas. His best friend bet I'd cry. I gave them a box. Inside were signed legal agreements, receipts, texts, recordings. Everything. No more silence. No more shame. If you've ever felt small, know this: the strongest people are the ones who learn to smile while building their exit. I'm not broken. I'm free. Merry Christmas to the women who finally walk away. #strength not silence, #Christmas truth, #divorce diaries. I hit post and exhaled. Within minutes, the likes started coming in. Comments trickled in from old friends, strangers, even a few people I didn't know had been watching. Women who had stayed too long. Women who were still pretending. Men who'd seen this unfold in their own families. Words poured in like warm water over frozen skin. You're so brave. I needed this. This is what healing looks like. But that wasn't the final blow. That was just the beginning. 3 days later, I walked into the glass building downtown, the one with the gold trim and high-end law offices that once felt out of reach. Danny met me in the lobby, handed me a warm chai, and smiled like a woman who already knew the outcome. He's panicking, she said as we stepped into the elevator. I raised an eyebrow. Already? She nodded. His lawyer contacted me this morning. Apparently, the Christmas stunt didn't go as planned. He's claiming you manipulated him. I almost laughed. He gave me everything. Exactly, she said. We're filing first. Today. The elevator doors opened to a sleek hallway that felt less like a law office and more like a quiet war room. And I was ready for battle. The filing went smoother than expected. The evidence was too detailed, too thorough to refute. Brendan's napkin signature was gold, sloppy, sure, but notarized. Dated. Documented. The amended addendum locked in my share of assets, spousal protection, and control over the house. The recordings were damning, but legal. He was aware the phone calls were recorded, and his words cut through any illusions of innocence. Within 48 hours, the court confirmed our petition. Brendan had been officially served. And for once, he wasn't the one doing the serving. But I wasn't done. There was still that final gift. The one he gave me without realizing. You see, Brendan had built his image carefully, charming, professional, polished. On paper, he was a rising star in his company. Online, he posted loving photos with captions like "My rock" and "Couldn't do life without her." His clients adored him. His bosses praised him. Until I shared the second post. LinkedIn. Photo, a generic office selfie. Behind it, a carousel of texts, hotel receipts, the napkin with his signature, names blurred for privacy. Caption. To the corporate world that praises charisma without character, meet the man who handed his wife a divorce on Christmas morning. He planned it with his best friend. He laughed about it in text messages. He built his career on charm, not integrity. This is not revenge. This is accountability. Women in business deserve better partners. I was his prop. Now I'm my own story. Hashtag professional accountability. Hashtag behind the smile. Hashtag women deserve better. Hashtag Christmas courage. The post didn't tag him. I didn't need to. His coworkers recognized the language. His signature. His tone. Within a day, it had over 75,000 shares. The comments flooded in, some supportive, others stunned. A few asked for proof. So I added more, blurred where needed, redacted where appropriate. All within legal boundaries. All undeniable. By the end of the week, he was placed on administrative leave pending internal review. By the second week, I heard from mutual friends that HR had launched a full investigation. Brendan hadn't just lost control. He'd lost the illusion. He called me that night. Private number. Straight to voicemail. Steph, his voice rasped, a strange mix of rage and desperation. What are you doing? You can't just drag me like this. You've made your point. You won. Okay? You got the house. The accounts. Everything. Just stop. I didn't respond. He called again. Left another message. You're ruining my life. I played it on speaker in Danny's kitchen. We laughed. Because for years, he had ruined mine. Piece by piece. Word by word. Diminishing my worth in public and private, like it was a sport. He thought silence meant weakness. That smiling meant surrender. He never realized I was documenting everything he gave me, every jab, every slip, every arrogant mistake. And now, I was simply returning it. Gift wrapped. A few days later, I visited my childhood home. My mother hugged me so tightly I could hardly breathe. She had seen the posts. Read between the lines. Knew she hadn't asked enough questions when I pulled away, missed holidays, stopped smiling in photos. She offered tears. Apologies. Quiet understanding. It's okay, Mom, I said, holding her hand. I let him dim my light. But it was never gone. We sat by the fireplace for hours, catching up on life I'd put on pause. She showed me pictures from my niece's recital. Gave me a framed photo from my wedding, one I hadn't looked at in years. Keep it, she said. You should remember how much you've grown. Not how much I'd lost. I started posting regularly. Not to drag him. but to rebuild me. Short essays. Reflections. Resources for women leaving emotionally abusive marriages. A private support group formed overnight. Women messaged me, sharing their own napkin moments, their own recordings, their own quiet awakenings. And in that space, I found something unexpected: purpose. Not just survival. Not just revenge. But transformation. By New Year's Eve, I stood in my living room alone. The same house. New decorations. New energy. I wore a silver dress, not for anyone else, but for me. I popped a bottle of Prosecco, turned on soft jazz, and wrote my resolutions on a gold note card. Speak less to please. Speak more to heal. Document everything. Teach others to do the same. Never shrink for someone who refuses to grow. Trust the woman who smiled while escaping the cage. The clock struck midnight. I raised my glass. To peace, I whispered. To power. And above all, to never crying for the wrong man again. The first week of January dawned like a quiet promise. Not a reset, but a continuation. The kind of beginning that doesn't come from wiping the slate clean, but from finally choosing to write in your own handwriting. The days after the divorce filing moved fast. Danny called it the aftershock phase, when truth finally lands and the pieces left behind begin to either scatter or rebuild. And me? I was building. Not just a life without Brandon. A life without fear. One chilly Tuesday morning, I stood in line at the bank to remove Brandon's name from our joint account. The teller, an older woman with kind eyes, smiled softly after glancing at the paperwork. "We don't always say it," she said gently, "but we see it. And we're proud of you." Her words hit harder than I expected. Not because I needed the approval, but because somewhere, deep down, I still struggled to believe I deserved it. For years, I thought surviving him meant I was strong. But surviving isn't strength. Strength is walking back into the world as if you were never made small to begin with. I started therapy, not just for healing, but for relearning myself. The first session was awkward. I spoke in disclaimers, softened every sentence with a smile, like I needed permission to be angry. The therapist, Dr. Lang, a woman in her 50s with silver curls and zero tolerance for self-minimization, listened quietly before gently interrupting me. "You keep saying, but it wasn't that bad." "Why?" I paused. "Because it wasn't physical. He never hit me. He didn't scream. But he twisted your words. Made you question your instincts. Used jokes as daggers. Took your confidence apart piece by piece until you apologized for asking for basic decency." I nodded slowly. Tears pricked my eyes. "Stephanie," she said, "emotional abuse isn't lesser. It's just quieter. But quiet things can still kill." That day, I started using the word abuse. That day, I started giving myself grace. Over the next few months, the world shifted around me, but so did I. Brandon tried to fight the case. He tried to gaslight me through legal channels, spinning stories of manipulation and malicious social media slander. But Danny was 2 steps ahead at every turn. His bluff was weak, and our documentation airtight. After a short and bitter courtroom appearance, the judge ruled in my favor, firmly, publicly, and irrevocably. I kept the house. I retained full control of our shared financial accounts. And most importantly, the judge awarded me a protection order that Brandon would never admit to needing, but wouldn't dare violate. Because this time, he wasn't dealing with the version of me who flinched at criticism. This time, he was facing the woman who had sharpened her silence into steel. But the real turning point didn't happen in court. It happened online, on a random Tuesday, when a woman named Camille messaged me. "Hi Steph. You don't know me, but I dated Brandon briefly last year. I didn't know he was married. I didn't know what he was saying about you. I just want to say, I believe you. And thank you. You saved me. Then another. And another. Soon, my inbox was filled with women, some who dated men like Brendan, some who married them, some who were still trapped, whispering their pain like secrets in the dark. I answered every single one. Not with advice, but with truth. You're not overreacting. You're not too sensitive. You're not the problem. You're not alone. One message came from a young college student in Idaho. She said she watched my story in silence for 2 weeks. Then she packed her bags. Then she left him. I didn't think I was strong enough, she wrote, but your story gave me courage. I kept hearing your line, I didn't cry. I calculated. So I calculated too. I sat in bed that night, holding my phone, eyes wide with something bigger than tears. This wasn't about Brandon anymore. This wasn't just about my story. This was an echo. And echoes ripple further than screams ever can. By spring, I turned my social media presence into a movement. #Silence is over. A digital support space for women leaving emotionally manipulative relationships. Not just a platform to vent, but a toolkit for strategy. Exit plans. Legal resources. Financial literacy. Therapy guides. Digital security checklists. And above all, community. We launched a private group for safety. Then a website. Then a podcast. I shared my story in episodes, slowly and with detail, just like I'm sharing it with you now. Not to entertain, but to remind you that quiet survival can become loud liberation. As the movement grew, Brandon disappeared. He moved out of state. Changed his job. Some say he's dating someone new. Some say he's still bitter. I don't care. Because by the time summer rolled around, his shadow no longer touched my front door. My life was finally my own. I painted the walls of my house. Soft cream and bold teal. I planted lavender in the backyard. Started writing again. Even went on a few dates, slow, careful, thoughtful. But I never looked for someone to complete me again. Because I realized I was never broken. Just buried. Under fear. Under compliance. Under the weight of a man who confused love with control. Now, I live in full color. I sing while cooking. Laugh too loud in restaurants. Wear red lipstick just because. Take selfies without apology. Not for revenge. Not for performance. But for proof. That I made it. That I'm free. And sometimes, when the snow starts to fall again, when the air turns cold and soft and familiar, I look out my window, mug in hand, and I remember that Christmas. The smirk. The envelope. The moment he thought he won. And I smile. Because he bet I'd cry. But instead, I rose. I gave him a gift that ruined his game. And I gave myself something better. A life I don't need to escape from. If you're still here, watching this, listening to this story, thank you. Not just for your time, but for your heart. And if you've ever felt powerless, I want you to know something. Your story doesn't end with silence. It begins when you decide to stop shrinking. You don't need a perfect moment to leave. You just need your first clear step. And if you're afraid you won't survive the fallout, let me tell you. You will. You'll survive it. You'll document it. You'll outgrow it. And one day, like me, you'll look back and realize. They didn't break you. They built the fire they thought would burn you, and forgot you were the match. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe. We share stories that give strength, peace, and clarity to those stuck in the storm. Your support helps others find the courage to write their next chapter. Thank you for watching.